На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. The first game of the Euros has happened this week in what is actually our officially numbered 100th episode of the Russian Football News Pod. But first, I'll have to apologise for my own sore throat. Woke up unfortunately this morning with a little bit hairy cough and perhaps induced off the England-related celebrations yesterday, so I hope you can all excuse me for that. Secondly, I would like to probably extend the best wishes and everything from everyone here and RFN towards Christian Eriksen. What happened yesterday was a scary reminder that there's far more important things than football, and to see his recovery and stabilisation and everything afterwards when it went on is great news. And although the coverage in England of the event was particularly galling, I'm not going to try and focus on that. And what I want to highlight is just the quick work of Anthony Taylor, the referee, in particular Simon Kerr, his captain, Kasper Schmeichel, and the entirety of the medical team and those involved who essentially saved Christian Eriksen's life on the pitch yesterday. It's emerged since that he suffered a cardiac arrest and was actually flatlined, pronounced dead at one point until the CPR and the defibrillator managed to basically recover him from the cardiac arrest. So essentially best wishes to himself and family, and just a scary reminder that families and life is far more important than sometimes just things that happen on the pitch. But one thing that did happen on the pitch is that Belgium and Russia took place, which was the opening game of Group B in the Euro 2020 for either team. As expected, Belgium, world ranked number one and one of the tournament favourites, destroyed Russia 3-0 in the end. It was goals from Romelu Lukaku, Thomas Meunier, and a third from Romelu Lukaku late on that saw Russia off. To quickly go through the Russia side, just as a quick start, it was a surprising formation. Stani Cherchesov got rid of his usually favoured back three, probably because of the injury to Fyodor Kudryashov and his lack of trust in general in other central defenders, some of the younger lads in the squad. And as such, it was Anton Shunin in goal, back four of Mario Fernandez, Andrei Semyonov, more on his disastrous performance later on, Georgi Shikia and Yuri Zhirkov at left back. Yuri Zhirkov dusting off his Zimmer frame in his 37th year to start again for the international tournament for Russia. Midfield two of Dmitry Baranov and Magomed Ozdoyev. And then Roman Zobnin, Alexander Golovin, Dala Kuzyayev and Artem Zuba as the attacking unit. And to discuss the match today, I'm joined by, as always, Richard from the RFN Pod.
Good evening, James. Hope you're well. I'm also quite well as well. Been enjoying the Euros so far. So, apart from Saturday night's game, of course.
Now, if you would wonder why would I introduce Richard from the RFN Pod? Because we all know Richard's from the RFN Pod, but it's because we are joined this week by a special guest, and that is Ben Jackson from the Belgian Football Podcast. Now, for those who might remember, we had Ben on last for one of the group games, Zenit against Bruges, way back when the domestic season was still in place. So, Ben, glad to have you on again, mate.
Cheers, James. Yeah, nice to be back on. I feel I quite enjoy seeing Belgian teams play in St Petersburg this season. It's been quite successful. So, yeah, but thanks for having me on. Yeah, and nice to see you as well, Richard.
Yeah, it's definitely not the first. I mean, at least this one, we kind of expected it. Last time I remember us saying that while we weren't particularly confident and optimistic about Zenit's chances, we thought that match in particular could have been their best shot at getting anything out of the group. But in terms of here, I think, but I was live tweeting the match from the RFN account, and at the end of the game, I basically said, look, this is Belgium, number one ranked team for a reason. The quality throughout the side is just stupendous, really. But from a Russian point of view, it's just a little bit of a shame that, particularly in the first half, the lack of urgency, the lack of real organisation and not effort, I don't think that's effort to be fair, but there's something distinctly lacking from the performance. And then both goals early on were quite large mistakes. Richard, what did you take? What was your take on Andrei Semyonov's pretty horrific back pass?
Oh God, it was just kind of the worst possible start for them, wasn't it? Obviously, look, it's caveated by the fact that Belgium are one of the top sides in world football. They're definitely one of the favourites for the European Championships. They've got quality all over their squad. And when you're coming against an opponent who have quality all around their squad in so many different areas, even with the absence of Kevin De Bruyne, you literally cannot make fatal errors against them like Russia did in defence. And it was just literally the first goal. Semyonov's feet were he was just in such a bad position when Thomas Meunier put that ball in. Was it Meunier? It was who was it? It was sorry, Jace Mertens. Trace Mertens put that ball in. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. I know Meunier did one of the assists, but yeah, when he was in such a bad position, and he got his feet all wrong, and then it literally just bounced to Romelu Lukaku in the penalty box. And given how good Lukaku has been for Inter this season in Serie A, he doesn't need a second invitation. He will score those chances. He's been on red hot form, and I think he really could be the man of the tournament this year in the European Championships. And then that's a bad start, and then it just went from bad to worse for Semyonov, didn't it? There was a complete hospital pass he played across to Shaqiri, which was intercepted. And it was such a good job. Georgi Shaqiri got back to tackle Lukaku. He literally had to make that intervention, or it would have been 2-0. And just all that half, he struggled, Semyonov. I think on who scored, he was given an overall match rating of 4.9, which isn't very good, and kind of summed up his evening.
Yeah.
And then also, Anton Shunin, for the second goal, he really needed to have a stronger hand on that for the shot that came across. He parried it straight into the path of Meunier. And it is interesting with Semyonov and Shunin, the two players who in the past couple of years I think have been quite reliable, steady performers for their clubs. And whilst they've still had good seasons this season, I think their level has dropped a little bit. I mean, obviously, they've been part of the national team for a while now. Cherchesov was not going to drop them from the squad. They're still probably amongst the best options Russia have got, really. But they have had dips this season in their form compared to previous seasons. I think that performance in the first half showed it, especially from Semyonov. He was literally all over the place. Shaqiri was literally covering for him so much. And it just, when you go 2 goals down against a side like Belgium early doors, your chances just evaporate because they've got quality all over the pitch. And it was always going to be a difficult evening after that. And then, in the second half, whilst Russia improved in the second half, I think Belgium, they literally didn't need to get out of third gear. They had so much more they could offer. Scurry fought for the rest without Kevin De Bruyne in that midfield, and probably with a couple of gears to go up. And the third goal, I know Diveev probably could have been a little bit better. Igor Diveev, who came on as half-time sub, I actually thought he had a decent second half overall. But, a few people have criticised him for getting outpaced by Lukaku for the goal, but Lukaku is just that good, and at the end of the day, he's in red-hot form at the moment. I'm not going to lay the blame on Diveev too much for that. I'm going to credit Lukaku. That was just brilliant forward play, lovely finish as well. Belgium were just far, far too good for Russia. I think they're definitely in a strong position to win all 3 games in this group. And Russia have got to pick themselves up quickly for the game against Finland on Wednesday.
Yeah, certainly. It's the manner of the defeat in terms of the self-inflicted goals were quite stark and worrying for the other 2 games, I think, going forwards. I would have taken it out of context a little bit and just thought, it's Belgium. Russia always struggle against Belgium, and Belgium, as you said, are so good. But there are lingering worries there, and these worries linger back to team selection in the first place, squad selection, and Stanislav Cherchesov with these bizarre formation change right in the last minute. I thought Russia looked far more comfortable in the back 3. It allowed protection, especially for Semyonov's errors. Semyonov, ironically doesn't actually make that mistake domestically very often. He's quite a solid, consistent defender, but he's terrible on the ball. He's never been good at carrying the ball out of defence and progressing up the pitch with it. So having a man either side of him helps that. It protects him a little bit. But the thing about Semyonov is that he really doesn't have the quality to match players at this level. I totally agree on Diveyev. He got done for base by Lukaku, which is, look, it's Romelu Lukaku. When he's up in steam like that and he's in the form he is in right now, there's very few defenders who could stop him. My bigger initial problem was allowing Meunier just to completely free him the pitch to cut in from the wing back and just go through the entirety of the Russian midfield without anybody really getting closer to him. That was quite worrying. But Ben, if I want to step back a little bit from the game first and just put Belgium in general, what were your thoughts on the squad composition of Belgium, and what is the current status with De Bruyne and his injury that everyone knows about?
Yeah, so I guess it's kind of, you look at this team and you just think, if you just look at the attacking lineup and the attacking players they've got, it is just ridiculous. Like, there's just so many good players in there. And like Richard was saying, like, there was no De Bruyne or no Witsel in this game. They're playing like Tielemans and Dendoncker, and you can still dominate a game like this and look ridiculously comfortable. Defense is the one kind of area that everyone's a bit like, has like, this is like their golden generation, but it has that generation, the defensive generation, just kind of missed the tournament because they're just slightly too old now. But I think on Saturday it was kind of like the best game for them in that sense, and they weren't really tested too much. Boyata came in and he was a bit of a surprise. Denayer had been kind of playing more of the warm-up games and friendlies and qualifiers, but he brings in Boyata, and I thought Boyata actually played really well. Someone on Twitter said they're going to start the Boyata fan club. That's how impressed some people were with him. So I think that was like a pleasant surprise. On De Bruyne, yeah, he's not likely to play against Denmark. I think there's a kind of like a decision to be made. He's going to start training with the team again, according to like newspaper reports and stuff like that. Then they're going to have to make a decision. But I think winning this game in such a comfortable manner means that they don't feel like they need to rush him back in for Denmark. They can save him for the Finland game instead. So I wouldn't expect to see him in the Denmark game. If he is, he'll come off the bench. I don't think he'd start. I don't think they're going to just jump him straight in. But I feel like the Finland game is probably like likely for him to come in. I think it'll be important for him to at least get some minutes under his belt before they go into the kind of knockout stages. Presuming they'll get there. Obviously, I can't imagine they won't get there. But yeah, I think seeing Lukaku play like he did and the way he was up for it on that game, I think everyone's kind of like, yeah, this, as long as the defense, it's kind of the defense is the issue. It's like going forward, everything's fine. So many good players. Hazard obviously came back in as well, so you've got him to contend with, and all the other sort of players. It's just the defense that you're slightly worried about, and depends when they're going to get tested. I'm not sure if Finland and Denmark are going to test them to the levels that you kind of will get tested later on in the competition.
Mm-hmm. I can resonate with that as an Englishman who follows Russian football, that the defence is one of the pre-tournament worries anyway. Maybe not yet, but De Bruyne is obviously a big miss. I mean, it goes without saying whatsoever, but of course Axel Witsel is also currently out injured. But is that the first? I mean, De Bruyne starts, but is Witsel as much of a miss, or with the form Yuri Tielemans is in, would you rather have him in the side anyway? Or is Witsel's game important because he can bring that defensive side to kind of protect Vertonghen's legs and perhaps Vermaelen if Vermaelen has to come on?
Yeah, I think Witsel, I think we can't underestimate how important Witsel is. I think he's just as important as De Bruyne. And when you play the two of them together, the balance is just perfect because Witsel will do that. Like you said, he'll do that protection work and stuff like that. And he's still like super athletic, super like high quality player. And he was kind of like the bigger worry. I think like, obviously De Bruyne's quality and everyone knows that, but I think people were kind of worried, Witsel's not there with the weak defense. Well, not necessarily weak defense, like it's got the experience, but like Vertonghen obviously went off injured, so he's potentially out of the Denmark game. He should be back for the Finland game, but they're not so sure. He's got like a swollen ankle. So yeah, we may see Vermaelen come in there, or they'll go for Denayer. I don't know who they're going to pick in that spot, but yeah, getting Witsel back I think is key, especially when you're up against the big teams and when you're going to be tested more, because he would allow them to play in such a way that they want to play and get the players pushing forward. And he allows De Bruyne to do that stuff. But I think, if you've got... It's such a nice thing to have, isn't it? Like Witsel, Tielemans, De Bruyne all playing at high level. I thought Dendoncker was quite good as well. He's obviously not at the same level as Witsel. But yeah, Tielemans, he's been fantastic this season for Leicester. He had so much time on the ball as well on Saturday. I think that was quite a nice warm-up, kind of getting into the game for him. He just seemed to always be in space. I think a couple of Belgian fans could have kind of wanted him to do a little bit more with the ball, but I think, like Richard said, they didn't really need to get out of third gear. Like they were just kind of coasting through the game.
Yeah, I think what's kind of nice about Belgium in that sense is that because of Belgium's ruthlessness and consistency in group stages of late, I mean, they won 8 out of the last 9 group stage games, some crazy stat like that, where it's like a very high level of which. Because of that ruthlessness and that consistency at this level and being able to see lesser teams off, if that's no disrespect to any of the teams who go out in the groups, but because of that, you can not have to risk De Bruyne, not have to risk Witsel until they are fully up to fitness. And that's more so indicative of and what I really think is what's strong about Belgium is the pure strength and depth in the forward positions. I mean, Jason Denayer is been very good in the last few years, in Champions League semi-finalist 2 years ago. But the Sunderland fan in me can't keep at the back of my head how bad he was for us under David Moyes. I know he's a totally different player than it was 3-4 years ago now, but that's always going to just sit there. And I think I'm haunted by the spectre of Jason Denayer back passing into their own net once. But I think that's the one area of Belgium's squad where they're not really as much strength in depth. If you take Lukaku out, obviously Lukaku, one of the greatest strikers in Europe right now, and I think he was one of the pre-tournament favourites to the Golden Boot alongside Harry Kane, then there is sufficient enough quality to replace him for these sort of games. If you take De Bruyne out, Witsel out, then Dendoncker and Tielemans are more than enough to get through Russia and Denmark and Finland, once again, without disrespect to them. So it's not really a massive headache for Martinez. I don't think he needs to risk them, because if we go back to Saturday's performance, then I thought I was really impressed by Tielemans' control and his maturity in attacking areas. Ben, I don't know what do you think about how he played?
Yeah, no, I was quite impressed. Joris on the podcast wasn't as impressed. I thought he was one of those ones that expected him to do more. But I thought he just looked really calm on the ball, like every time. I think Russia just gave him far too much space. He just definitely seemed to always have so much space, and the defense was pushing up so high as well, and kind of helping him out in that sense. But no, I'm a big fan of Tielemans for sure. I think he played really well. I think on Lukaku, if Lukaku isn't there, I think Batshuayi will probably score goals, and he always seems to score goals for Belgium. He's sort of like the Belgian Danny Welbeck, I guess, to kind of compare him to an English player. Then there's also there's other players that he's got at his disposal. We're quite excited about Jeremy Doku. I think at some point he's going to play him. I think like you said, what they kind of have, which is so lucky, and now with 5 substitutes as well, is that they can get all these players minutes during the group stages, so that when they get into the knockout stages, everyone's kind of had a bit of tournament football. They've got the feel for it. So no one's coming in a little bit like, oh, this is my first minutes of the game, and now we're suddenly in a knockout game. It's like, no, I've played a bit of the group stages and stuff like that. And I thought kind of before the game with this one, it was like, okay, they're playing Russia in Russia. Kind of, you're looking back sort of like, oh, Russia 2018 World Cup, home advantage. They were really surprising and really good. But then as the game started, I was like, no, this is a completely different kind of feel to this game. Belgium seem to be way more comfortable in this situation. They're way more in control of everything. And I just thought they could have kind of put the hammer down if they really wanted to and really, really racked up the goals, but they just didn't seem that fussed about it. They were like, we've got the 2, we're ahead. Then they grabbed the 3rd. It was just kind of quite casual. And I think if Lukaku really, really wanted to, he probably could have been like, no, guys, I want to go for some goals here. I could really get a head start on Harry Kane and a couple of other strikers, but I'd be surprised if he isn't the Golden Boot winner, just judging by the look of that first game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously, the 3 pre-tournament favourites were him, Kane and Mbappe, which I mean that it's going to be one of them.
Mm.
I think the way that what favours Lukaku is Belgium's style of play. Belgium's style of play is really trying to get the best out of Lukaku and releasing him behind. Obviously, England want Kane to score, but a lot of what Kane does is actually and maybe sometimes doesn't get credit for it as well, is how willing he is to come deep and do some of the dirtier work to create the space for others. I think part of the counter-attack that saw Raheem Sterling scores, Kane vacated the space, dragged a defender away that Sterling then cast into and got in the end of Phillips's ball. Now, that's great for England, but it's not necessarily that helpful for Kane trying to get the golden boot. And if Lukaku's in the form he was last night, I mean, the finish for the first one was absolutely brilliant. Schunen had no chance. And then for the third one, the timing of the run to get to just steam away from De Gea, like he wasn't even there. And then the finish from taking it so early, I think there's question marks over Schunen with his positioning, but because Lukaku hit it so early, he just completely caught him off guard. And that ruthlessness is exactly what he's done for Inter Milan all season. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was Lukaku as well. I think it's hard to look away from that. One funny little part that happened last night was the introduction of Denis Cheryshev. Of course, Dela Kozyaev went off injured as a result of a clashed head. And Cheryshev replaced him in the 30th minute, and then half an hour later, by the hour mark, Cheryshev himself was hooked off and replaced by Lyosha Miranchuk. Now, Cheryshev is an interesting case because he's kind of loved by a lot of more casual football fans in Russia, if that's the fair thing to call them, because as listeners will well know, you have like people who follow RPL and then those who are Spornaya fans and national team fans, and they don't really follow domestic football that much. So to them, Cheryshev is a hero because of what he did in 2018. But he hasn't played at all for Valencia in 2021. He hasn't scored for them in like 21 games it is now. And he hasn't played barely for Russia since he was called up for the Euros team and played in the friendlies leading up to the tournament. But so there's a lot of speculation about whether or not Cheryshev was injured, but I'm sure Stani has actually confirmed since that bringing him on and off again was actually tactical. And Cheryshev was absolutely dreadful. He's a bizarre player because you can see he has quality, and he wouldn't be in the La Liga for a decade or so if he didn't have that quality. But it really looks like it didn't in 2018, but it is now. It looks like he's unlike Lukaku, who's jumped on the back of his brilliant form this season, and he's absolutely flying. His confidence is as high as it's been for a very long time, probably since he was at Everton, if not even better now with the domestic title as well in his hands. But Cheryshev really seems to be one who's on the other side of that, where he's completely lacking in match fitness in general. And that's one of his biggest issues. He plays a major tournament, then barely plays for 4 years in between. He has been transfer listed at Valencia, but Richard, I know you follow Spanish football quite closely. Are you surprised that Cheryshev was in the squad in the first place? And how did you think he played last night and in Russia's attack in general? Because to me, it was like Artyom Zuba was just totally isolated.
Yeah, that's my thoughts exactly, James. On Cheryshev, as I say, I watched quite a lot of the Liga, but I've not really been seeing much of Valencia recently. They're kind of a club in turmoil, players leaving left, right and centre, fans rebelling against the owners. And with regards to Cheryshev, it's one of those players we've sort of, haven't we, on previous RFN pods, we've sort of been waiting for this Cheryshev breakthrough. We thought we had it in 2018. It was like, yes, at long last, you're 27, entering the prime years of your career. Finally, we're going to start seeing this breakthrough. And he was playing at Valencia back then. He had a spell at Villarreal, didn't he? But yeah, just we're not seeing this kind of breakthrough. And it's just such a real disappointment. And I think I kind of get this impression that in 6 to 12 months, he's probably going to be back in Russia, and he'll have a couple of steady seasons out back in Russia and then probably finish off in 3 or 4 years' time. It's a real frustrating thing because, obviously someone who's trained in a Real Madrid academy is going to be of a high level. Same with Barcelona. If you've trained in one of those two academies and a youth product there, the quality of coaching that you've received, and you're going to be, you should be in theory a decent player at minimum. Someone who's good enough at minimum to play second level in Spain, which is obviously based on recent RPL teams in Europe's performances, is comfortably good enough to play for a decent RPL sized club. But yeah, we're sort of left a bit underwhelmed really with the with Cheryshev. It's going to be a big couple of months and years ahead for him. Just hope he can finally showcase the form he showed at Russia 2018. But time is running out for him. And as for the game in general, well, I mean, we kind of said it on our pod, didn't we, 3-4 weeks ago? This was our fear, that the squad Russia had picked, you only have to look at the three forwards, Artem Zuba, Alexander Sobolev, and Anton Zabolotny. They're all quite tall strikers who you get the ball up to. And we were literally saying, didn't we, that he'd only picked 3 strikers. I thought when the squad was announced, it was quite midfield heavy and forward light. And, you know, we were saying on the pod, didn't we, what is the tactics for Russia going to be at these Euros? Get the ball up to Zuba. But what else? There's no one making run. There was no one. He was literally, like you said, he was isolated up front. It seemed to me that there was no one really to either side of him who could, you know, make runs beyond him. You know, I'm not expecting them to go gung-ho against Belgium, obviously, because Belgium are a top-quality side. But you did expect a little bit more, like, in terms from an attacking point of view. You know, Russia were playing at home in St Petersburg. You do expect a little bit. It's not as if they went away to Stade de France to play you know, the French national team or something like that. They were playing at home. And, you know, I'm not, like I say, not expecting gung-ho, but just push a few more people further forward. But, you know, with Kuzayev and Zobden in there, it was pretty much a team designed to try and completely nullify Belgium. But
Yeah.
it kind of left Zuba isolated up top. And, you know, Golovin didn't have anyone to hit as well. You know, I mean, he was kind of running around like a mouse in a maze. You know, he didn't have anybody to hit out wide as well. You know, it was just the squad the team selection was just not great. And Zuba just no, and Zuba just like you said, just isolated. But he was toiling away, and
it really stems with me. I mean, well, if you want to get through the issues of the Russian national team and where they stem from, we'll probably be here for about 8 hours. But if we just take it into isolation and purely this match, this squad, it does stem for me with Stanislav Cherchesov every single time. Now, Cherchesov is basically a hero still. He's regularly frequented at one of Putin's dachas outside of Moscow and the one down near Black Sea coast, his big palace down there. He's constantly having breakfasts with Putin and they speak on a pretty much daily basis. And because of that, his job never has been and never will be at threat. He will only leave when he decides to leave. And unfortunately, he's the most stubborn man in Russia. Russia is literally like an epitome of Stani's football and what he likes in a footballer. He likes physicality, experience, industriousness above anything else. Up top, all these strikers are exactly the same, as you said, Richard. There's no plan B. It's all the big, burling target man, and it's going to be backs to the wall with your big, burly defenders who are defenders first, defenders second, and then actually play their ball third. And in midfield, it's all very industrious. His preferred defensive partnership down on the left was Kudryashov and Zhirkov. Zhirkov's 38 in August and Kudryashov's 36 at the end of the tournament. It's all just, and everything on Saturday night was that. It was watching Yuri Zhirkov try and not do his hip in by chasing shadows all night. It was sitting deep with 11 men behind the ball, 10 men behind the ball, backs against the wall and hitting it long. If you're going to have a low block like that, you need to apply some pressure, even if it's just one man at a time and they take the turn. And because you don't want to be too open. It's against Belgium, of course you don't want to be. But if you're applying zero pressure and all you've got is Zuba, who's on the wrong end of 30, was never fast, was never particularly energetic, just constantly running his arse off, trying to press these 3 defenders with the movement that Tielemans had. I wasn't massively impressed by Dendoncker in the final third, but that's not his job. Dendoncker's progression from defence and getting it up I was really impressed by that. And partly because Russia allowed it, there was just not enough pressure whatsoever in the final third. And a lot of this stems back to the squad selection, who's been omitted, the team selection on the day. Denis Makarov's been in great form this season. He's the only winger in Russia's team, and that includes Lyosha and Golovin, who's got real lightning quick pace. And when you're sitting backs against the wall like that, you need that in the final third. They just offered absolutely nothing. I think the only shot on target came from a corner, a set piece, and that was literally the only place that a Russia goal would have came from. But Richard, any last words on Russia's performance last night in general before I'd go back to Ben?
Yeah, I'll quickly just mention that, and I've got a question for Ben at the end, which we can feed into when we go back to Ben. I just wanted to mention with Cherchesov, I think it all starts to turn. I have noticed he's been getting a lot more criticism online recently as well. I think the goodwill period definitely now is over for him. I have noticed as well that I think where it all started to go wrong for Cherchesov was October, because that was the two results where I think it changed. If you remember, it was the Nations League. It was 0-0 against Turkey and 0-0 against Hungary. And they were the third and fourth games of Russia's Nations League campaign. And at that point, they'd won 2 games. They won their first 2 matches, and they were in a brilliant position to win their group, win promotion to Nations League A, and then, carry on the good vibe factor from the World Cup. And then those 2 draws just stalled it all. And then there was the fiasco in Serbia in that final Nations League group, where Russia went from being top at the start of the match day to third, and just absolutely nowhere. And it was just an embarrassing night in Belgrade. And I think really those 2 results, that should have been the warning sign for Cherchesov. Right, this side's gone as far as it can go. We often talk in club football about a manager needing to freshen it up after a while. It's the same in international football. Eventually, after a while, your squad gets old. You need to replenish it with younger players. Players lose form. You need to replace them with players playing better. Now, look, Russia doesn't have a huge talent pool of players, but surely I just don't understand the justification you can have for picking Yuri Zhirkov anymore. I mean, yes, 3 years ago, he was still playing at a decent level for Zenit. He was still playing at a decent level for the Russian national team. But it's just been so clearly obvious for the last 12 to 18 months that he's just not at the level anymore. I mean, it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, every 20 years at major tournaments, okay, it's 21 because this is a year later than what it should have been. But I'm thinking, in 10-year gaps between tournaments, there's always a player who a national team manager keeps picking, even though they just can't see that he's done. Like, I remember all the way back at Euro 2000, Lothar Matthäus kept getting picked despite being 39 and his legs are gone. I remember Marcello Lippi picking Fabio Cannavaro for Italy at the South Africa World Cup, even though 2 months earlier Bobby Zamora had completely destroyed him at Craven Cottage. It was obvious he was gone, and now this is 10 years on from that. It's now Yuri Zhirkov. I mean, it's literally just staggering. And yeah, the squad selection, as we were all saying in our chat with Denis Makarov, he really needed to come in. Makarov, he's not an out-and-out winger, but he adds something, a bit of guile, a bit of speed down the line, someone for, Zuba to find, someone for Golovin to feed with balls. I think Mostovoy's withdrawal from the tournament, pre-tournament with COVID, was a blow as well. Again, someone offers a bit of speed down the wing and a bit of guile. He's been okay, Mostovoy, not really hit the ground yet for Zenit. He had a good loan spell at Sochi. Just something a little bit different. It just seemed like a very static side. And yeah, Zuba was just ploughing a low furrow up front on his own. And I did feel sorry for him. And the goalkeeping situation too. It was Guillaume until like that disastrous night in Belgrade against Serbia, and then he switched to Shunin, and you can't really keep switching your keeper. That's why, and even though Shunin hasn't had a great season, I sort of understood why he's kept with Shunin in goal, because you don't really want to be changing your goalkeeper again. You don't want to get into that kind of habit. And yeah, it's going to require from Cherchesov some rethinking now, and he's got to act fast. I mean, I personally, like I said, after the tournament, even if Russia go out in the first round, I still don't see Cherchesov being sacked, because they're already partly into the 2022 World Cup qualifying section. He's got a contract till the end of that tournament in December 2022. But yeah, I think now has come the time for Cherchesov to start experimenting. We've seen it's been kind of that time now for the last 10 months or so, and he's not really been doing it. He needs to start now, because the side has regressed from 3 years ago. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that and squad selection. And yeah, I'll get on to my question now for Ben. I'm just wondering, with this Belgian side, obviously much has been made in the media about it being the last, this golden generation for Belgium's last chance at a major tournament. Do you share that belief, or do you think that they could stretch it out to 2022 World Cup in Qatar and have another chance with that? Because a lot of this side now is at their peak. Maybe, as you mentioned earlier, the defence probably getting on a little bit now, but I still think this side could stretch out to 2022 if needs be. I mean, but obviously, yeah, this tournament is a massive opportunity because a lot of these players are at their peak. But do you see this as the very last chance for these set of players, or do you think 2022 is quite realistic too with the majority of this squad?
Yeah, I think 2022. I think the defense, because it's literally like when we're thinking about it, it's only next year. I think this is obviously the last chance at European kind of tilt, because I just don't see where you're getting the new defenders from, and for them to be at the level that these guys have been playing at, like Adevard Vertonghen, like these guys have been playing top level football for most of their careers now. That's where my one worry is, because we see it in the Pro League, we've seen it like when there are like young attacking players coming through who I think could make the step up. I don't know if they'll get to the level of like a De Bruyne because he's just ridiculous, but I think you like Lukaku's not going to be that much older next in like a year's time. You're never going to get a drop off in that sense, and like the rest of the teams should be fine. It is just that back line that you're worried about. But I think 2022, I think they'll have a chance. But I think when you then factor in kind of the teams that have to come up against to get there, like you presume a team like a Brazil, you'd worry about that kind of attacking flair that they have going up against a side like Belgium in terms of defense and stuff. So yeah, I think it's better for them to kind of put more pressure on this tournament and I think they're just not thinking about the World Cup and that sort of stuff. But they have a chance, but I just don't know if when you add in all the other teams in the World Cup, whether they'll be able to do it. But yeah, this year and next year, it's the final chance for this generation, I think.
Do you think that perhaps one of the younger players from the under-21s, like Charles de Ketelaere, could have been perhaps given a chance? Because he really impressed me in the Zenit Bruges game at the start of last season.
I don't think so. I like him. I think he's got some development to do. I don't think he's ready yet. I think compared to the other players that you'd have had to leave out, I don't think it'd have been the right decision to make. And I also don't think we've really worked out his best position yet. Like, he's played out wide, he's played in behind the striker, he's played as the striker. Like in the Zenit games, he was playing as the striker, but then in the league, that wasn't where he was playing. They didn't use him as a striker, they'd use him out wide. And he's shown like flashes of brilliance. So I know that Bruges fans are really, really hyped about him. And we really like him, but we're not entirely convinced that he is completely ready for this, like especially for this tournament. And there were some other players that he left that he didn't bring, like Sambi Lokonga has been playing really well for Anderlecht. He didn't include him because they're just not quite ready yet. I think De Ketelaere, I think he needs another season at Club Brugge at least, consistently playing at the top level, adding more goals and assists to his game. And then I think Martinez will look at him. But I'm pretty sure he's on his mind. But yeah, I think he wouldn't have been ready. Although he'd have probably enjoyed to play this game in St Petersburg, because that'll be a place he has fond memories of. But yeah, not just yet for Charles.
Yeah, just far too stacked in the final third of the pitch, really. But yeah, I didn't want to be too harsh on Russia because of the quality of Belgium in the squad and the play on the night in general. And I was surprised when Martinez got the Belgium job, but I think there's not a single doubt out there anymore with what he's been able to do with the squad. I mean, Belgium for a while have had very strong players, but this is really the best that they've had, and he's really getting some good performances and results out of them. I think most of the doubters were forgetting that international tournament football and domestic football are two totally different kettles of fish. Look at Gareth Southgate. He's doing, I think, quite well with England. But if any big job in the English Premier League would come up, then I don't think it would even be considered. I think it's just two totally different styles of management, and different people cater to that. Stani Cherchesov, yes, he won the Czech League and he's won the Polish League, and he's managed various teams in Russia over the years, probably did the best with Dinamo, getting them into Europe that time. But he's just far too stubborn and arrogant to be able to be amenable to be a successful international manager, in my opinion. I think, Richard, you hit the nail bang on the head. It was that 5-0 with Serbia, where they were 4 down at half time, and then the 0-0 draw with Moldova that happened just after that. In that 0-0 draw with Moldova, which you might think is nowhere near as embarrassing as the 5-0 to Serbia, but that was really the last call-up for a lot of the exciting youngsters and a lot of the under-21 crop. That's when he decided to give them a chance and Deveyev struggled, Daniel Fomin struggled, Chalov struggled, Yevgeniev. We haven't seen Oblyakov in any form of Russia squad since then at all. We haven't seen Shelenkan Bakayev, who's not a youngster, a little bit older, but these are he has his core that he trusts, and I don't trust that core to get out of this group whatsoever, even in third place, especially with Finland's result. But as a little aside, as we do finish off here, Richard, as it's the first of our Euros tournaments, what's your prediction for Russia then, just in general for the tournament?
I've just not got that much enthusiasm about them getting out of the group. And I know it sounds really bad. I can't say for certain whether they'll come bottom of the group yet. But Finland's result against Denmark the other night, on the same night, has certainly now thrown this group wide open. I mean, I think Belgium are going to clean this group up. They're going to win all 3 of their games. So it could be quite close between the other 3 sides in the group. I mean, if Russia can get a result against Finland, suddenly then second place looks on, But do you really have any confidence? I mean, based on what we've seen in recent results from Cherchesov, the results prior to the Euros weren't great either. The wins against Malta and Slovenia in World Cup qualifying weren't great. They lost away against Slovakia, the first really tough game of the World Cup qualifying so far. They lost away and deservedly lost away against Slovakia as well. The 2 friendlies prior to the tournament against the Poland side, who were missing a number of first team players, in Bulgaria, who are just dreadful at the moment, weren't great either. I'm not entirely confident. I mean, will Russia get some points on the board? I think they probably might, but will they get through? That's looking a bit more of a difficult prediction at the moment. I mean, look, I didn't expect them to beat Belgium, again in St Petersburg the other night, but you expected a little bit better of a performance from them. It was a poor performance, and especially considering, I thought, even though I didn't think Russia would win the game, I thought, with Hazard having injury issues at Real Madrid this season and De Bruyne being out, it might, it was a bit of a glimmer of hope for Russia that they might be able to get some from the game, but if they played really well. But I think that was just extinguished straight away. Belgium, were comfortable all evening, didn't even have to play that well, and yeah, I'm not greatly enthusiastic based on what I've seen pretty much since that October international break and those 2 0-0 draws. I think that's when it's all kind of gone downhill for Stanley, and he needs to adapt now. I think desperate times call for desperate measures, and he needs to adapt now and start to integrate younger players in this side. But it's like you said, James, a lot of the minutes for the younger players have dried up in recent games, and I actually do think that he's not overly that keen on Deveyev as well. I think he had that difficult half against Serbia, didn't he, in the recent friendly? And I think since then, Cherchesov hasn't really been too fond of him. Obviously, look, every single manager, is going to have players who they rate and don't particularly rate, or use more and use less. But I don't think he's been that fond of Deveyev. And I mean, personally speaking, I probably would sub him in against Finland in place of Semyonov, who obviously had a mare and has not had a brilliant season. But I suspect Stanley will go with much of the same. But yeah, not overly confident at the moment, have to be honest. It's worrying signs.
Yeah, likewise. I think the Finland result really opened the group up in terms of the race for second, but without wanting to analyse that too much, because I don't actually want to, after what happened, to be frank. But all I will say is that I think because of what went on, and Kasper Schmeichel's dad, of course, the famous Great Dane himself, Peter Schmeichel, has said that they were kind of forced to do it. This is his claim, that he claims that they were backed into a corner where they could either play the game then in the morning or forfeit 3-0. And I think because of what happened, that really affected the Denmark players, and you could tell on the pitch that it affected them. So I think that result is potentially an anomaly, and I don't think it's even worth analysing it too much because of what went on the pitch. But Ben, what's your predictions for, or expectations, at least for Belgium, for the rest of the tournament?
Yeah, so I think I agree with you guys. I think they're going to wrap this group up. It's a shame, because I thought Denmark would be a tough test, and it's just really sad how that's played out for them. I still think they will be, but I think Belgium will have too much for them, and psychologically you don't know where those players are at, and there's just no you just feel for them, I think. Yeah, and then I think, obviously with Finland, I think we'll see them against Finland. I think we'll see a bit more experimentation. I think a couple of other different players will play. Martinez will maybe mix it up a little bit. I think they can go really far. It's just depending on who they come up against and how well that defense can deal with it. And yeah, if Witsel and De Bruyne come back in and they're playing at the level that they can play, I think they can definitely, like, semi-finals minimum. I think we've said that on our podcast. We've been like, we think they'll get to the semi-finals, but then when you get there, anything can happen. Obviously, I want England to win it, but if Belgium, I think they can. It's just so dependent. And if Lukaku stays fit, like any injury to him, I do worry in the latter stages, because I think he is going to be such a difference maker in these games, especially when you've got the creativity of De Bruyne. If Hazard gets fit as well, like he's kind of this unknown kind of factor, because we don't know if he's going to reach the levels that he's shown before. If he starts to reach those levels, it kind of again like elevates them to another level where potentially you don't have to even worry about the defense, because attacking wise they're just so good. So semi-finals, I'm pretty confident they'll get there. Not too sure if they can push on past that with the defense, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it is fair to say that with Lukaku. I mean, Belgium aren't over-relying on Lukaku, but Belgium are one of those teams where the central striker is probably one of the most integral parts of the side. Belgium with Lukaku, Kane in England, and even then Russia with Artem Dzyuba. If Dzyuba's not on form or Russia can't get him into the game, then you really struggle to see where the game winners are coming from elsewhere. And then Turkey with Burak Yilmaz. Belgium are one of those sides where if anything happens to Lukaku, then you could worry. But I mean, when Harry Kane went down and had his little bit of an injury scare in the England's opening game, and he died inside. But thankfully, it all seemed all right in the end. And unfortunately for Russia, it wasn't quite all right on Saturday night with of course, go down 3-0. Russia's next game is in Group B, of course, is that Finland game that Richard mentioned earlier, and we'll be back after that with some Finnish guys to review all the action. And that is the end of this week's RFN podcast. Just thanks again to Richard and Ben for both coming on.
Pleasure as always.
Thanks for having me on.
This has been the Russian Football News Podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.